You can't stop Jim Capers. I got my first Purple Heart, my first Bronze Star, and now they're going to give me the Medal of Honor. That is for the Battle of Phu Loc. Well, it was a 4-day mission. We went in and we got shot out, and then that's when, all hell broke loose. We fought day and night. We killed as many as we could. You grab them here, you cut his throats, then you rip them, you move forward. Those are the things that we saw. I was wounded a bunch of time. My legs were broken. My one dog King was killed. I called for an extraction. The choppers came in, but I told my platoon sergeant, take my men out, leave me behind. And I guess this is a lot of what the Medal of Honor thing is on. I give it up before I leave one of my men behind. They'd lose a man behind. It's scary, but in a way, that's who we are. You cannot outfight Team Broad-Minded. Nobody ever did.
Could you tell us that story?
Yeah.
Team Dog. Premium meals designed to keep your dog healthy, happy, and strong. To improve digestion, boost energy, and support a shiny coat. Non-GMO ingredients. No fillers, no gluten, no corn, no seed oils, and no soy. Just pure, high-quality ingredients to fuel your dog's best life. It was crafted by experts made for your dog, Navy SEAL K-9 trainer, and nutritionists. Team Dog Food, where no piece goes to waste.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He's a Marine Corps major, commanded the Recon units in Vietnam, widely known as the father of the Marine Corps Special Operations and one of the most respected veterans of the Vietnam War, also one of the most respected Marines in Marine Corps history. He was inducted into the Commando Hall of Honor at MacDill Air Force Base, and in March of this year, President Trump signed a bill to award him with the well-deserved Medal of Honor, which we'll certainly get into. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Major James Capers. Great to meet you, sir. Thank you very much for doing this. It's an absolute honor to be able to sit down with you and chronologically go through your life story and career. And there's so much out there about you. To be able to meet a living legend is a huge honor for me. So thank you very much. Do you have a favorite quote?
Yeah. Looking at it last night. Fate whispers to the warrior, you cannot withstand the storm. The warrior whispers back, I am the storm.
That's amazing. It's one of my favorites too, for sure. Is that does that take you back in time or resonate with your time in service? Is there a certain thing that does that for you, a certain experience or a mission you were on that encapsulates that?
A lot of missions, we'll get into all of that.
Yeah. What was your favorite thing to do growing up?
Surviving, I guess.
Yeah. In reading your backstory, it's pretty remarkable, the childhood that you had, where you came from, and all the different things that you experienced leading up to the Marine Corps. I would love for you to kind of walk us through your childhood and give us a picture of what that was like, which I think is hard for a lot of people to imagine.
Yeah, I was born in a little town called Bishopville, South Carolina, years ago, and before civil rights and those types of things. My folks were farmers. We lived on a farm, and at some point in time in my young life, I became sick. And back in those days, childhood deaths were prevalent. And it didn't look like I was going to make it. We'd already lost 3 other siblings in the family. So my father arranged to give me to another family. It was a white family that he thought they had a better chance of, my survival. So I was given to another family, and they apparently took me in, and there's still stories about that particular time. And they, of course, cared for me, and I'm alive today because of that, the kindness of a family that I didn't know.
How old were you, an infant at that time?
No, I was about 5 or 6.
Do you remember much of that?
I don't know. Sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that I remember being with someone who didn't exactly look like me.
Yeah.
And I do remember years later, I seemed to have a memory of a white lady, blonde hair. Didn't look like me, but she apparently took care of me. And I do remember that. And so I think that was part of it, that gave me the idea everybody's not bad.
Yeah.
The kindness that they showed to me and ensured my survival.
That's amazing. Do you know what the relationship between your parents and that family was for them to trust?
Back in the old days, we were farmers or sharecroppers, and most of the families who owned the farms were not African Americans. They were, a different family, but we all worked together for survival, and they apparently had something to do with my survival. All in the details, I really don't know, but growing up, I heard these stories about this family, and that I probably wasn't the only one that they gave a hand to.
I mean, it's such an incredible story that, your life kind of balanced on their ability to take you in. You mentioned that you had multiple siblings that passed away at an early age. Did you have other siblings that you grew up with?
Yeah, I had a sister and two brothers, and now I have a niece who was the only survivor of that Capers family. She lives in Texas. She just left there a couple of days ago. She'd come to visit. And we had a reunion here of all my Recon guys, and she was here for that.
Oh, wow. Can you describe growing up in the South during the Jim Crow era, what that was like as you got old enough to have memories and the different experiences that you had?
Well, the memories were relatively good because my parents and the other families worked hard to ensure my survival. And of course, we all know about the tragedies of African American, farmers or sharecroppers. But it wasn't always that bad. It's certainly the memory of a child. I didn't see the horrors because the families helped me out to understand that and to make sure that it didn't get to the point where I was full of hate, because I saw a lot of love during that period of time.
Yeah. It's such an amazing contrast to, your entire career of starting in such a tough spot like that. From an education standpoint, did you go to public school growing up? Or?
Not in South Carolina, where I was born. I didn't go to school. After my father apparently had an issue, and he had to leave South Carolina, so he went to Baltimore and left the family in South Carolina. And at some point, he was able to arrange for me and myself and my two brothers, my sister, and my mom. We all ended up in Baltimore, where I grew up. Went to school and joined the Marines and those type of things.
You know about how old you were when you moved to Baltimore?
I don't really know. Probably I would think about 6, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember making that move and kind of the contrast between where you'd spent your life up until that point and now being in Baltimore? I'm at there.
I remember, I wrote in my book, one night a vehicle showed up, and we all got into this vehicle. And I think we traveled the back roads because back in those days we didn't have hotels for African Americans and the things like that. So we traveled the back roads, and I'm sure my father had arranged for someone to get us to Baltimore. The young mother with the young children traveling the back roads from South Carolina to Baltimore, Maryland. But we got there safely.
So is that something that you remember doing?
Really?
Yeah. Were there any close calls along the way where you had to?
Well, because back in those days, there were not really facilities for African Americans. So my mom was traveling alone with the children. She had to be very careful to get us fed and, bathroom breaks and all that. And so I remember some of that. But then I've read a lot about it. Through the years, I read about, the cruelty of that period of time. But we also experienced a lot of good people along the way. They took in African Americans and did what they could to ensure their survival.
Yeah. It's quite the contrast of good versus evil. Pretty stark.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall what your father was doing in Baltimore for work?
Well, there are a lot of stories about my dad. He's basically a farmer, but in the 40s, he went to work and to take care of his family. But along the way, there wasn't a whole lot for a young family like his. So he did what he could to ensure survival. And that part of it, he was a gambler. Whatever he could do to make a buck. He probably had a run-in with the law, because coming from South Carolina to Baltimore, Maryland, and not being an educated person, but he had a good heart and he ensured survival. I am the last survivor of that family now. Well, I have a niece, my sister's daughter. She is the only, other than myself, only survivor. Oh, wow. But the old man was a good guy and did a good job.
Yeah. Do you remember your first memory in Baltimore of what it was like, where you lived?
Yeah, I lived in South Baltimore. I loved it. And there were buildings in my neighborhood. There were stores on the corners and automobiles and, things that I was not familiar with. But it was, it was something that I welcomed. I had a chance to go to school. I was given books. My school was on my block and I could walk to school. I had teachers. I had all these things. I had stores on the corner. We didn't have to hitch up the mule and go to town to buy something. So there was a big difference for me, but I enjoyed it.
Was starting school, was it a predominantly African-American school or white school?
Yeah, well, there were not many white schools that I can remember. So they were all African-American, all in one neighborhood. And a lot of them had come from the South. Some were running from something that couldn't make it in the South there. So they found a way to hitchhike to Baltimore and found solace there. And they did what they could to survive. And some couldn't make the change. They found a way to go back to South Carolina.
Yeah. From a school environment standpoint, I guess it's not that you can compare it to anything else, I guess, but in terms of any sports that you guys played, did you play any sports growing up in that school, or did you guys do any extracurricular, playing baseball? That's fine.
Yeah, we played it all, and we didn't have the protective material. We just went out in the street and chased each other around, or played baseball, or
Yeah.
But it was a time of euphoria for me. It was just, and I remember those days. The whole neighborhood was like a fort. And we took care of each other.
Yeah.
And they would, the parents made sure that we didn't get in trouble. Of course, some of them did, but mom was always looking out the window.
Did you have a favorite meal growing up that your mom made?
A meal? They were all good meals that my mom made. And don't talk about my mom now.
All right.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
I'm always fascinated by kind of the family tradition of when your holidays or different meals. Were there
experience that I saw it in Africa? I lived for a time with a tribe of Negritos in the jungles in the Philippines. We parachuted in and we learned to live as a part of that family. We learned to hunt and fish. It was all set up by naval intelligence. But these are things that I compared my upbringing to what I saw in different countries. In Europe after World War II. So this is my military experience, and certainly during the war in Vietnam, we made a mess of that country.
Yeah. Going back to kind of your childhood experience and the catalyst to leave Baltimore and take that next step and ultimately join the Marines. Can you walk us through kind of the catalyst for, when you graduated, or did you graduate, and what was the next step that led to joining the Marines?
Yeah, I was a good student, I think, and did well. And I was there during World War II in Baltimore, and I could read. We had the newspapers and the radios, and I could hear about the Nazis and the Japanese, and the whole world was a mess. And I listened to the radios and I read the newspapers to give me some, what in the world's going on, and how am I going to survive this? And I remember the end of World War II. The Japanese and the Germans, and I could read the newspapers. I don't know how I learned to read, but I could read the newspapers, and I had an opinion about different things. I was growing up and trying to understand the world. I had listened to the radios. We didn't have TVs back in those days, but we had the radios, and we had the news, and we're talking about D-Day now. I remember D-Day.
Wow.
Yeah, I heard those broadcasts. I heard how I made those TV programs up about the Americans that landed, and of course when the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor. I remember that. Yeah, a lot of those things, I do remember. Sometimes I don't get it exactly right because I'm getting a little bit older now, but I do have those memories.
Wow. I can't even imagine. I mean, I've seen and watched and read so many different documentaries and specials on Cold War II. It's really amazing to be able to meet somebody who remembers that. Those are just such incredible stories. Was that the motivation that made you want to serve also?
During that period of time, we had blackouts because we were always, told in the neighborhoods that the Nazis were going to come or the Japanese were going to come. And so you had to turn out all your lights, and the neighborhood was black, blackouts there. And I said we didn't have TV, basically, but we had the radios, and they had the emergency broadcasts, and they were told to turn out all the lights or be quiet, and those types of things. And of course, we were kids, and we listened.
Yeah.
And then later on, we were able to understand that what was going on. We had a lot of Japanese spies and German spies that were there serving their country in that capacity. So the trust factor, really trust each other during that period of time. But eventually, when it was over, I recall when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and killed 100,000, let's say innocent folks, but it was a tragedy. When I learned the Holocaust in Germany and the way they treated, the way that when the Nazis became the power, how they treated the Jews. So I was made aware of that. When I got to Germany some years ago, they still hadn't repaired Germany. It was still a mess.
I imagine, at the age that you were when those were taking place, it's hard to kind of grasp the gravity of that as you look back, once you became an adult and how you're serving in the military and thinking of, say, the nuclear bombs being dropped. What do you think that was the right call? What were your thoughts on that now as being able to look back as an adult on that?
There's been a lot of discussion about whether or not we should have dropped the bomb on the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. So I remember that, and I studied it. When I was on active duty, we went a course called a Nuclear Biological Chemical Warfare School. And you had to have a certain IQ to get in there. And I remember when I was allowed to attend that school, and I became the honor graduate because curiosity.
Yeah.
What happened here? But I enjoyed it and then the course, and something I still study. The Nuclear Biological Chemical Warfare School and all that. I was the commanding officer of one of those schools years later.
Yeah. To think back as we sit here, do you think it was the right call for us to have done that?
And I don't know that I have an opinion, of course, but given what I understood from the world as it was, we were about to blow ourselves up, or the Germans, of course, they were just about ready to develop the nuclear bomb. If we hadn't done it, they would have. The Japanese were close to it. So I think that, given what, President Truman had to deal with, and then later on Eisenhower and the rest of them, it's just been a problem for us as human beings. I don't really think that we're done with that yet.
Yeah. I unfortunately agree with you. I think we continue to make the same mistakes as a people. Can you walk us through from leaving Baltimore to ultimately ending up in the Marine Corps?
Yeah.
All right, so I want to talk about something I didn't think I'd ever frankly care about, and that's taking care of your skin. I'm not a guy with a routine, never have been. But when you're outside a lot dealing with the sun, the wind, the cold, your skin can really take a beating. And at some point, you start noticing it. Dryness, irritation, just looking worn down. Particle sent me their face cream to try, and I have to tell you, what sold me is how simple it is. It's one product, 30 seconds after you shower or shave. It's not greasy, there's no overpowering smell, it just works. There's no 10-step routine, no nonsense. If you want to take care of your skin without making it complicated, this is it. Go to particleformen.co/micdrop and use code MicDrop to get 20% off. Again, that's particleformen.co/mic drop, code mic drop, all caps, all one word. It's simple, it's no nonsense, takes a few seconds, and you're good to go. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Summer looks different for everyone. For some guys, it's the best season of the year. Travel, adventure, time with the family. For others, it's a nonstop juggle that quietly becomes overwhelming. Kids are out of school, schedule blows up, pressure coming from every direction, and that underneath of it all, this nagging feeling that the sunny days are slipping by and you're not actually enjoying any of them. I've certainly been there. You're surviving the summer instead of living it. And the honest answer most of us don't want to hear is that we need support to actually get there. Therapy isn't about being broken. It's about understanding yourself well enough to set better boundaries, make better decisions, and build a version of summer, a version of your life that actually feels good. BetterHelp has over 30,000 fully licensed therapists and have served more than 6 million people worldwide, with an average rating of 4.9 out of 5 based on over 1.7 million client reviews. A short questionnaire matches you with the right therapist for your specific needs, and if the match isn't right, you can just switch anytime. You don't have to say yes to everything this summer. Find support in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/micdrop. That's betterhelp.com/micdrop.
Well, during that period of time, I was walking down the hall one day, a kid, and I saw this young lady. I said, wow, I fell in love. I went home that day and I told my mom, I said, Ma, guess what? I saw this girl today. She said, okay. What does she look like? I said, she was the prettiest thing I ever seen, Ma. Mom said, sit down, son, I fell in love. I never loved another woman as I loved Dottie Capers. We began to see each other in the halls of the school and fell in love. When I joined the Marines, did my first 3 years, and then she waited for me, and she went on to college, and I went on to fight a war in the Middle East. I landed in Lebanon in 1958. Built my first human being in the mountains. I figured out what all that was about. And Dottie, my best friend, we were married 50 years. 50 years we were married, and I lost her in 2009. She died of cancer. But we loved each other, and she followed me around the Marine Corps, and we had a child. And we lost him in 2003. So losing my child and my wife, I had some psychological issues. The war came back. And I became angry. But after I buried my wife and my son together up in Arlington National Cemetery, and that's where they're buried down. And too many of my troops are buried there also. Yeah. But I'll see them again. I'll see my wife and I'll see my son again. Yeah. They're waiting for me.
That's really tragic. I'm sorry to hear that. In terms of the start of your career going to Lebanon prior to Vietnam, I guess even before that, was there ever a thought process for you of not wanting to join the military because of kind of how the country treated you and your family? What non-fighting was that?
No. What are you talking about? I always wanted to serve my country. I saw a lot of the goodness of this country. I honored that flag and the men who carried it in combat. At one point in time, they declared me insane.
Really?
Really.
Why?
Because I was insane.
At what point in your career?
This is the Vietnam era. I spent a year in a hospital in Bethesda, Maryland. I was not a nice guy. Kept me in the hospital for a year. I learned to be a human being again. Lost a lot of good men in battle. But, when you're in a hospital, you go through certain things and the memories come back. And I think that they did the best they could to understand what we had gone through during that war, and nobody really knew much about it. I don't think they did a good enough job to help us, come home again and to understand the joys of this country.
I feel like they still don't. I know my generation of warfighters on Iraq and Afghanistan, I think, struggled from a lot of the same things. I don't feel like they've made a lot of progress in that regard. Before you went into Lebanon, do you recall their kind of mission statement as to why you guys were going and what the objective there was?
Well, I got there in 1956 when the Egyptians had closed the Suez Canal. And Eisenhower, who was president, said, you better open it back up again while I'm sending Marines in. And the Marines were at that time feared. They had conquered Iwo Jima, Guadalcanal. And some of those guys were certifiable in second, from the different wars, and that's what the Marines were at that time. It took a lot of professional doctors and nurses that helped us out. I was a beneficiary of some good doctors and nurses and folks who cared for me. I had lost so many men in battle. I've been wounded pretty bad. I got hit 19 times and both my legs were broken. I still got 6 pieces of bullet fragments still in my legs now, and it's in the bone. And I took it on the chin. I'd gone from being a sergeant to being a staff sergeant. Then all the officers in my unit were killed the first 3 months. And then they commissioned me from staff sergeant to second lieutenant. They didn't bother to send me home to go to officer training. So you got it. These are yours now. And of course, I had to fight my way through it. Lost some good men, but I did the best I could. And they let me keep the commission after the war. At first, these battlefield commissions, they would revert you back to your enlisted rank. But they said, well, this guy's done a pretty good job, so we're going to let him keep this commission.
That's a huge step up in responsibility overnight. Was that overwhelming to jump into that, or you just knew you had to do it?
Yeah, it was something, and there was these young guys who were mine. I had trained most of them, and I just felt like the other officers are gone now. It's a good old leadership principles, and so I jumped in there and took over. All the officers were gone, and then after the war, when I got out of the hospital, they allowed me to keep my commission. And so I kept it, and they made first lieutenant, and I made captain, and I made major, and got selected for lieutenant colonel, but I chose to retire because I couldn't do it anymore. I was jumping out of airplanes, and I had a son at home who was blind, special needs, and they wanted me to keep doing this stuff. And I was getting old. I was about 38, 39 years old. It was hard for me to do the stuff that I was doing when I was in my 20s. So I decided to retire. And I enjoyed that retirement until one night my son come to our room and said, Dad, I got a stomach ache. And 3 days later, he was dead. And shortly after that, my wife died of cancer. So then the demons come home. And I was angry. How could this happen to me? I served my country. Now I've lost everything I had. So I got on a plane one night and flew to California. Just took off. Left everything here. The hell with it. Nobody cares about me anymore. So why should I care about you? Maybe I just thought that nobody gave a damn about me anymore after all the hardships I've been through and losing everything. But when I got to Raleigh, I guess it was, and they put me on a plane and they flew me to flying to L.A. and said, we're going through some tough weather. And I said, I don't care if this plane lands or not. I've lost everything I have now. It was at night and plane was going up and down and why do I care if it crashes or not? I've gone down in helicopters in enemy territory. I will fight my way through and I'll kill whoever gets in my way. Somewhere along the line, the plane stabilized and the sun came out. And I realized that God had determined that I was worth saving. And that plane flew on through the darkness and got to L.A. and the sun was out. Jim Capers had survived one more time because God says that plane won't crash. They didn't really care. What do I care now? Taking away everything I had. Lost all those wonderful men in battle. But God said to me that I'm going to grab you one of these days, but not tonight. And the plane flew on, sun comes up and it landed in L.A. And there were a young lady who was my business partner at that time, and her dad met me at the airport. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I was angry. Even when I was out there, I knew something was wrong, so they put me in a hospital. They knew that, something's going on and I couldn't understand it. But folks got around me and they helped me out, the doctors and the nurses, and the folks figured out there's something wrong with this guy. But there was that period of time. I became whole again. And after 5 years, I wrote a book, did the documentary, and met some nice people, and I was able to come back home to Jacksonville, North Carolina again.
I'm curious about the hospital experience. Did they diagnose you with anything, or what did they do to make you whole again? How did you accomplish that?
They told me I was crazy. Back in those days, we had PTSD, and one day I was in my room, and there was a young man named Mr. Oshira. He was a Japanese American, and they put him in my room. I was asleep. I woke up, and I see this Vietnamese look at me, so I decided to kill him. He had done nothing to me, but he looked like somebody I had to deal with years, not years ago, and he was a very smart young man, and he went and locked himself in the bathroom. And because I guess he saw the look in my eyes, but eventually I realized that he had done nothing to me. We became friends. Mr. Oshira, he was a gymnast at the Naval Academy. It hurt his back. And they put him in a room. They should have told me that he was there, but they didn't. So I wake up, this guy is standing at me. So I decided to kill him, which I had done many times, but never saw him again. But I used to we sit there in my room and I'd tell him funny stories and he would laugh. And I often wondered what happened to Mr. O'Shear. But he had just something that happened along the way to recovery. But a lot of those, that time when I was there, that one afternoon, I was in my room there, and the door opened, and this guy walks in. Hey, Lieutenant, how you doing? I said, I'm okay. I said, come in. And he came in and he sat down. I said, where have you been? He said, well, I had to go away. And then another Marine that I knew came in and he said, Lieutenant, we've been looking for you. I said, well, I've been here. And then before I knew it, there were 7 Marines in my room. And they were talking, they were laughing. And the nurse was outside my door. And the first guy says, hey, Lieutenant, well, we got to get out of here. We can't stay too long. I said, where you going? He said, well, we got to go back now. Says, hey, I'll go with you. Said, no, sir, you can't go this time. I said, you mean after all those missions we ran, now you said I can't go? I said, get out of my way. You can't stop me. I'm the meanest son of a bitch in this world. If you don't get out of my way, I'm going to kill you. I said, no, you don't need to do that, but you just can't go. And before I knew it, all more go, or they all left. The nurse came in the room and she said, what's going on in here? I said, what do you mean? She said, all this noise. And I said, when some of my friends come by to see me, she said, Lieutenant Capers, I've been sitting outside the door and nobody's come in here. And I said, well, they were here. I was talking to them. They asked me to go with them. And I went to go with them. And somewhere along the line, I tried to get out of my bed and I fell and I saw this bright light. I said, hold on, I'll go with you. But I was on the floor and I was being drawn toward this light. And all of a sudden, this loud noise was like a big bursting bomb as I was getting drawn toward this. And then I was back on the floor again. And I was bloody. The sutures in my legs where, I'd been patched up, had opened, and I'm lying on the floor bleeding. And I didn't know how I got there. I didn't know what that bright light was. I didn't know what the sound was. I didn't know whether it was God calling me home, whether God was, I guess the light I saw was was God.
Did you grow up Christian?
Yeah.
Were there any voices that you heard during that bright light, or was it just the sound?
When I saw the light, I know that first, when the voice told me that if you turn to your right, you're going to see God. And, keep in mind I had medication and all those other things going on. So I don't know that I saw God, but I saw that light. And to me, that meant I was being pulled toward God, and I was going to see God.
Did that moment change your perspective on life and
Forever.
forever? Yeah. Growing up Christian and going through all these different experiences that were incredibly difficult and traumatic, were there ever points in your life where that shook your faith in God?
All the men I lost in Phu Loc and Khe Sanh, and I couldn't get a handle on it, Wasn't a bad guy, I don't think, but I did some bad things. I killed a lot of men. And maybe I felt that first God's punishing me by taking my only child and my wife, and war's a terrible thing. And I didn't ask for any excuse. And I did what I was trained to do, and I did it for a long time.
Can you talk about the journey into recon from being in the Marines to actually starting recon and kind of how you went through that?
Oh yeah, I was an infantryman at first. Joined 1956, and then my first 3 years, I was a grunt. Then after my first 3 years was I went to see Dottie Capers, and I told her, I said, my time is up as a Marine, and I could come home, or maybe I could re-enlist. She says, well, what will you do? Where will you go? I said, well, I've never been to California. Maybe it would be nice to go to California. And then I said, would you like to go with me? I hadn't bothered asking to marry or anything. I just got it out. She said, yeah, I'll go. Wow, what just happened here? Go ahead, son.
But I guess going back to the starting of, when you moved to California and ultimately ended up in recon, it was a new thing at that time, correct?
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what that was like?
Yeah, when I re-enlisted, I went to California, and the war started, and they sent me to Laos somewhere. I had to send my wife home and my child, and I went to, I don't know, I traveled the world pretty much. I was in a group called the Marine Pathfinders, and we were the guys that went ahead. We prepared the landing zones for the assault forces. So we would jump in and prepare whatever and hold the ground until the larger force would come in. I did that for 13 months. And then when I come home, reunited with my wife and my son, we became a family again. And we had a couple of good years, and then the Vietnamese thing happened. So I spent the year in Vietnam.
So when Vietnam started, at that time, what did you think of our involvement in it, and if we should have been?
Well, the French had been there for years, and the French Foreign Legion went in there and they made a mess of things. And the common thought was, the French did make it, so we don't need to do this. Let them handle their own problems. But then again, the political thing at that time was that if we don't, the Russians, and it was always the Russians, and so we decided to send in the Marines at that time, and I guess I was part of some of that. But it wasn't a clear mission. We went in and, we tried to win the hearts and minds, and, we're going to go in and help you with your crops and help you with the diseases that you have, and we're going to become your friends. Well, the Chinese came involved, and they started sending in some of their troops. And then the Russians began to send in some of their instructors. And then we began to have contact with the Russians. Well, they were called cell leaders, and we were beginning to have problems with the Chinese. Putin went to China. We just got back from China. So I saw a lot of that as it was developing. But China had developed a nuclear weapon, and of course we had nuclear weapons, and so did the Russians. So we were all trying to keep a lid on this nuclear thing. We were about ready to blow the whole planet up. And so Kennedy became president, and I was coming back from Okinawa somewhere, and Khrushchev was sending equipment to Cuba. And Kennedy says, no, you didn't want to do that. Cuba's 90 miles away from Miami. So he said, you need to get those nukes out of Cuba. And I think, Kennedy said, if you don't, we're going to come in there, we're going to get them. I was still on active duty. I remember that pretty clearly. I was one of those special operators. We could swim in, jump in, blow things up. So I became part of that. I remember when Kennedy made his speech. Of course, after he was killed in Dallas, Johnson became president. And he came on television and says, hey, we're not going to tolerate this. But Kennedy had been killed. So it got to be an international thing. We're all in front of our television sets. We just got out of World War II, or out of Korea, rather. No. So there's a lot of things going on as a young family man. I'd already been in war in 1956 when we went into Lebanon. And that was a mess, and we still got a problem with Lebanon. But at any rate, this was stuff that I saw as a young man, and reflecting on it now and trying to understand the connections that as I'm coming in and trying, I'm moving forward, trying to be a good American. I remember the trains coming home from World War II with the American flags, and I was so proud of it. And, and now is my time. It wasn't easy because I had a family at this time, and we weren't quite sure if we were going to be able to survive this nuclear threat. But we did, obviously, so far. But I had no misgivings about it. The Russians will never be, and it is not now, an adversary. They're afraid of us. I knew a lot of Russians, here and there. And I think the best way forward now is to keep this near thing going right now. The Chinese in 1951, the 1st Marine Division destroyed 9 Chinese divisions. The Marines became the most feared fighting force on this planet. We captured Iwo Jima, Guadalcanal. So we pray on that. But as long as we have that flag that I fought for and damn near died for, nobody will ever conquer in this country. We've been hit on the head, but that's what I saw. And it is an older guy and talking to a young man and a young lady. I can honestly say that I took part of that, to ensure that you guys can enjoy the best life that you can. Still have that these days. Still have that. But what I left behind and when I spent those years overseas is when I leave. Hope I've got a little while, left. Never know. Doesn't matter. But anyway, I'm rambling. So hit me with something else.
Well, I'd love to hear about kind of the progress or the progression through Vietnam as you first got there, and if you could kind of walk us through the missions and the deployments and how you went from starting out as an enlisted guy to leading and commanding a group of men.
Well, in 3 years as a infantry guy, and I re-enlisted, and I made what I guess was sergeant or corporal depot or something like that. And I spent 3 years in Egypt and different places in the Middle East, and I decided that I would try something a little bit more difficult. So I went to jump school and scuba school and demolition school, and I became a martial artist. It was a black belt. And so I was experimenting and, I was having fun with that. But then the war started and they were looking for guys like me that they put out an all purpose thing. Says anybody who have these skills, we need you now. And so I talked to my wife and I volunteered to join Force Recon, and that's when it started. But one thing that we don't talk a whole lot about nowadays, as an African American, I was only one there. We didn't have a lot of African Americans in that time because they said, well, we won't take these guys because African Americans can't swim. Well, I could swim. Was on a graduate in the combat swimmer school. But I didn't let what people said about me or, that I knew what I could do. But it was challenging, of course. But I had to, but back in those days, as an African American, I was challenged. And they were the naysayer and said, well, when I went to scuba school, Key West, Florida, after I got there, the commanding officer of the school called me in. They said, well, I'm going to send you back to Camp Lejeune. I said, well, what happened there? I said, well, because we know that B. Rose couldn't swim. And they said, I'm not going to ruin my career by having you drown in the toughest course in the world. And so I'm giving you orders to send you back to Camp Lejeune. Yes, I will not risk my career because I already know that you cannot pass this course. And I told the commander that, well, I've already been pre-tested. Before they sent me here, they knew I can pass the course. All the tests. And he said, I understand how you feel, but my career is important to me. You're not. I said, well, Man, let's make a deal. I'm being a little bit presumptuous here now. Let me start the course. If the first day that we start this course and I cannot compete, that I'll voluntarily drop out of this course. Said, I already know that you can't pass this course. He said, but I'll give you a chance. First day, I tore it up. I was just running around doing stuff, push-ups and sit-ups, and making sure all we had young SEALs at that time. They were just coming along. And they were instructors and whatever, full of themselves. But I had never run into anything like me. I was motivated. I had killed my first human being by that time. And there'd be many more to come. But I was able to complete the course, and I was honor graduate. Wow. But the bad part of that was that when we graduated, we all out there, and the chief came out and gave us all of our certificates. And the commander came by. He didn't speak to me. He was given a certificate, and the commander shakes your hand, congratulates you. He walked by me. Didn't shake my hand. I said, all right. You can't stop Jim Capers. There's no way, But I graduated. I still got my certificates. But that guy never stopped to shake my hand and say, I outswam everybody in that course.
It's terrible.
Yeah, at the time, this is 1966.
Did you ever see him again?
No.
Did you go to Vietnam shortly after that?
Again, we're on the way to Vietnam.
Yeah. What was it like first showing up with Force Recon in Vietnam, and how did it differ from your other experiences there?
Well, it was kind of hard because we made full combat swims in shark-infested waters in Nha Trang there in Vietnam. I led my divers in the water, and unfortunately, there were a lot of sharks in the water. And we want to put over an aircraft carrier. We swam under the aircraft carrier to see if we could find anything explosives. So I took 10 men, and we swam the whole length of the ship. At the end of it, tiger shark showed up, and one of my men, his buddy line come loose, and he was floating out where the sharks were. And I made a decision. So I hooked my buddy line and swam out there, and I got him. Hooked him onto my buddy line, and the tiger sharks come by, but I had him. I held on to him. The tiger sharks were 8 to 10 feet long, voracious. And the Army had a base there, and what they were doing was dumping garbage in Nha Trang Harbor. And so when they dump garbage, guess what? The shark shows up. And the Navy and the Army was supposed to say, hey, okay, we're not going to feed the sharks today. But the word got screwed up, and the Army dumped the garbage, and the shark showed up. My team is on the aircraft carrier. Didn't lose a man.
Wow.
These are all facts.
Yeah. Are there missions that stand out in your memory that you can or would like to share?
Yeah, well, so I ran 50 missions in Vietnam. We went into the one that when they had captured some American POWs, the CIA came to us and told me that they had some Vietnamese and they were captured, and they knew where they were. One of the Vietnamese, a guy named Lap, which I liked Lap. He was a Vietnamese, but he didn't seem to play by the rules, so they put him in the camp. And Lap escaped, and the CIA picked him up and brought him to me. So we took 10 men and Lap, and we were supposed to parachute in. We figured, that may not work, so we go in by helicopter. took lap with us, got to the POW camp, killed everybody. And we killed them all. And the problem was how we're going to get the hell out of here. And the choppers put us in. They come to take us out of there. We didn't have the POWs. But I got my first Purple Heart and my first Bronze Star on that particular mission. There's a lot of other missions that, you were kind of lucky to get out of there. The chopper landed and they dropped the hoist down. And we had to get in the hoist and they pulled us up. And I was the last man on the ground because I wanted all my men to get up in the hoist. And I stayed on the ground. Not heroics, but damn it, they're my guys. I'm not going to leave them on the ground. And so I was the last man on the ground. I got hit in the face. Spent some time in the hospital. But that was fun, I think, because that's what we were trained to do. We wanted to get those Americans out of there. And they would treat the Americans pretty bad. I saw those camps. Saw how they treated them.
How many POWs were in the camp?
5. Well, no, there were a bunch of them in there. But the ones we were after was 5. And we didn't get them. I think we had a shot at it. But there were some things went wrong. This was those missions, the CIA, the Special Forces, and a lot of us got together to bring those Americans home. We knew they were there. We just missed them. And that bothered me for a long time. How in the world could we knew they were there, and the CIA knew they were there, and they've been POWs for a long time. We got to get these guys out of here. Well, I guess I got my first Purple Heart, my first Bronze Star, and now they're going to give me the Medal of Honor. That's what they say anyway.
Have they mentioned which mission that is coming from?
The Battle of Phu Loc.
Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, it's
We're heading into summer, but the economic pressure isn't letting up for most families. Inflation is still grinding on everyday costs, groceries, gas, everything. And what ends up happening is people start leaning on credit cards just to keep up. High interest debt starts stacking up, and suddenly that financial cushion you worked hard to build starts disappearing. Here's what a lot of homeowners don't realize, though. You've probably got more equity sitting in your home than you think. And that equity can actually be the weapon you use to fight back. American Financing is helping families get out of that high-interest trap right now. They have salary-based mortgage consultants, not commission-driven salespeople pushing you into something that doesn't make sense. With mortgage rates in the 5s, their customers are saving on average $800 a month by using their home equity to wipe out high-interest debt. $800 a month back in your pocket is real money in an economy like this. There's no upfront fees, no pressure, and if you start today, you could delay 2 mortgage payments. Call American Financing today, 866-891-3262. That's 866-891-3262 or americanfinancing.net/mic drop. It's funny how sleep changes as you get older. In your 20s, you can run on 4 or 5 hours and power through. Coffee, adrenaline, sheer stubbornness. That just doesn't work anymore. Somewhere in your 30s, bad sleep starts costing you. The brain fog, the shorter fuse, sluggish workouts, that feeling that you're just not fully on. And most of us keep grinding through it instead of actually fixing it. My problem was never falling asleep, it was staying asleep. Once I was up, and I'd spend the whole next day paying for it. That's what brought me to Beam's Dream Powder. I wasn't looking to get knocked out, I just wanted real restorative sleep without that groggy, drugged feeling the next morning. Beam sent me this to try and give my honest take, and this is genuinely what changed things for me. Dream is made with a powerful blend of all-natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. The chocolate peanut butter flavor is absolutely delicious. It's like hot cocoa before bed. And Beam has now improved over 30 million nights of sleep across this country. Sharper, calmer, more focused. That's what consistent quality sleep actually does for you. Go to shopbeam.com/micdrop and use the code MicDrop and take advantage of my exclusive offer for up to 40% off Beam's Dream Powder. Seriously, think about it. How much would you pay for a truly great night of sleep? With my discount MicDrop, go to shopbeam.com/MicDrop today.
What was a 4-day mission? Bloody, I would think. We went in, first we went in and we got shot out. Too much fire on the ground, so we backed out. And then we went back. We went back. And we landed. Kind of complicated. We were doing some different things to try to get out of the line of fire. I think the first night we spent that night in a graveyard. The graveyard had the cement headstones. So we spent the night there. And then at first light, I moved and in contact. I had 10 men and a dog. A large German Shepherd called King, who was what you might call King was, they call a dog like King. He was trained and I saw him kill 2 enemy soldiers. This is on the Phu Loc mission. Yeah, King jumped. He jumped the first one and he knocked him down and he ripped his throat out. And the second one, he killed and he ripped his groin out. And King was a big dog and he hit you, he knocked you down. So he killed 2 and he got hit. And he was not too far from me. I saw his tongue hanging out. I knew he was dead. And then that's when, all hell broke loose. They hit us and we killed as many as we could. Yeah, there was a violent 4-day, day and night. And we just felt like they were going to be overrun. So I called for an extraction. Well, first I called for artillery. They dropped artillery in, and the artillery came in, and then the choppers came in because it didn't look like we were going to be able to hold on for another 2 or 3 days. We had been resupplied up there. They sent the helicopter in to drop us more ammunition and food and things like that. This is the 4th day and night, strict. And this is their area. And we fought day and night. Everybody was wounded. My old dog King was killed. It was what we might call hand-to-hand combat, which is, we're all trained, that you grab him here, you cut his throat, then you rip him, and you move forward. Because this one, it should be dead. When you cut his throat and blood flows everywhere. And those are the things that we saw. Personal combat, but everybody's trained for that. And I was wounded a bunch of time. My legs were broken. And I went to get my dog out of there. He was lying there. His tongue was hanging out. So I reached trying to grab his collar. He was a big dog and I couldn't drag him. The chopper showed up, and then everybody knows I didn't get on the chopper because I want to get my wounded on there in the dog's body. I stayed on the ground. because the bad guys were going to show up. And we fought. I think we did good. Didn't lose a man. I think we put the fear of God in them. You know, when you attack a post recon group that's got artillery and we had jets and we had helicopters. We got all of our wounded out. Didn't lose a man behind. Then we're going to do that. We're going to bring everybody out of there. But I told my sergeant that you take my men out, leave me behind. And I guess this is a lot of what the Medal of Honor thing is on. You know, I would give it up before I leave one of my men behind. Take my men out. And I stayed on the ground. Not heroics, but it was such a 4 days of, it was scary, but in a way, that's who we are. You cannot outfight Team Broad-Minded. Nobody ever did. And when the general come to see me, he kissed me on the forehead, told me what a great job Team Broad-Minded had done. A couple of months later, he was dead. The chopper went down. Never saw him again. He's the one who recommended me for the Medal of Honor. But he was killed. So now, years later, you know, they're going to try that again. The last time they tried it, they gave me the Silver Star, which is the third highest. And then a young general come to my house and said, well, you know, I heard all these stories about what happened to Team Broad-Minded. I'd been retired. He said, why don't you come back to duty and let's take a look at this thing. No, let's see if we can prove whatever happened at Phu Loc. So I told my wife, well, she said, but you're retired now. You got to learn to leave this all behind you. I said, yeah, but it would mean a lot if for the first time an African-American Marine Corps officer is given the Congressional Medal of Honor. So I went back to duty. And the young general, he was lieutenant in my command at one time, but now he's a retired. Oh, he was on active duty. He hadn't retired yet. So General James Williams. So he pulled me back on duty. Let's take a look at this Medal of Honor thing. And he says, yeah, well, you know, we all think he deserves it. But the high-ups says, nah, let's give him the Silver Star. And then years later, Frank shows up and became friends. And they put together a team and say, you know, we're not going to accept this. No, we're going to take a look and see whether that Lieutenant Capers, whether he's black or white, let's take a look and see whether or not he should have gotten the Medal of Honor from that Battle of Phu Loc. Yeah, and it worked. The president called me a few weeks ago and said, we're going to give you the Medal of Honor.
What was that like?
Huh?
What was that like?
Well, it was great. We got a film. I don't know if you ever saw the film, but there's a little 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah, he called the house. Very, very cordial, very nice man. And just talking to him, he was serious. He says, I heard that, you know, of course, when the president hears something, you know, it's usually pretty correct. You see a lot of people, but he was very kind to me. And he says, why don't you come to the White House and we're going to give you the Medal of Honor.
I appreciate you taking the time. You mentioned Khe Sanh as well. Was that a very prominent operation?
We fought 3 months up there, day and night. And that's a hard mission. They dropped us in, and we were right up on the border. We faced the 324th B Division, a Chinese division. They've been there for years. So the Marines come in, and we had to fight the Chinese and some Vietnamese also. That's at Khe Sanh, and this was a hard 3 months. I was there for 3 months. I got hit twice at Khe Sanh. Well, we fought them.
It was, I assume it was more than just that 10-man unit. It was a bunch of...
Yeah, and there was a battalion up there. We had some CIA guys there and some Army guys. It was, it was like an American outpost. There were good troops there. We had barbed wire where sometime at night, about say 2 o'clock in the morning, you'd hear the bugles. They stopped blowing the bugles, and they'd hit our lines. And we had barbed wire there, and sometime you could hear the bugles, and they'd come in yelling and screaming, and they'd try to get through the barbed wire. And we had this is close combat where we couldn't use our M60s. We used knives. No, we had this hand-to-hand combat, and they'd come through and they'd be yelling and screaming, and then you could hear the Americans. Young Americans are full of themselves. Come and get us. And they never backed away. Americans never backed away. They never took Khe Sanh. It's one of the few bases they never took. But we also had a group of young Marines who were in supply and special operations. They were the guys that everybody, when Khe Sanh got hit, it looked like we might get overrun. So down in a place called Dong Ha, which is about, 30 miles south of Khe Sanh, the cooks and the bakers, they volunteered and they fought their way to Khe Sanh. Those are the young guys that say, I'll go. And they had these trucks and they took in food. They took in food and ammunition. They brought out the dead and wounded. They fought their way from Dong Ha to Khe Sanh. And when they got out of the trucks, they got in the lines and they fought at night with the troops. And these are the guys that are not infantrymen. These are the cooks, but they were Marines. And they fought their way all the way to Khe Sanh, got out of those trucks, and they fought there with the guys who were there. And we had some Army guys there also. I don't know where they came from, but the Army guys showed up. And I was glad to see them. So it was an American outpost. We had sailors there. I don't know where those airmen came from, but it was something good to see. We had our flag there. After about 3 months, they decided to pull us out. We had the unit ready to go, and I had this flag, the American flag. I had it in my jacket. And the C-130 came in around a mountain and landed. It skidded to a stop, and they dropped the ramps, and all my guys got on board. We were getting out of there now. We were going south now. I had another battle. It was Phu Loc down the south. That's all we did was fight. Put them here. CIA needs them, or whatever it is. But we got out of there, but because the C-130 was trying to turn around so it could be in a position to take off. It wasn't going to stay on the ground very long because they were dropping artillery on us. And I had my flag there. And my platoon sergeant said, "Come on, Lieutenant, we got to go." And at that time, the propellers hit my flag, and it flew over the side of the mountain. We're up on top of a mountain then. And he said, "We got to go now." I said, "Give me a minute, Sarge. My flag is right over here. I can reach it." He said, "No, Lieutenant, it's going over the mountain, over the top." They said, "Come on, let's go now." On the top of the aircraft is about ready to take off. I said, I can reach it." And he grabbed me and says, "No, Lieutenant, we've done the job now." And the flag flew over the hill, the top of the mountain there. And I ran for it, and Sergeant Yerman grabbed me and pulled me back. He said, "I'll get you another flag." But the flag fluttered over the side of the hill. I couldn't reach it. I carried that flag all this time. Now it's gone. And Sergeant Yerman died 3 years ago. Platoon sergeant. Good man, tough man. But anyway, I lost that flag, and it seemed like it was symbolic. Losing that flag cost us to lose the war. I don't think we lost the war, not Team Broadmounted anyway. You have to know those guys. There's only one still left alive these days. A young man named Henry Stanton lives in Louisiana, lost a kidney, and was shot all up. But he's coming to the White House with us.
A year period standpoint, which years did you spend in Vietnam?
1966 and 67.
Okay. Between Phu Loc and Khe Sanh, are there other operations? I know you did a lot of them, but are there any that stand out as being ones that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, the water missions, and we were always combat swimmers. We made a lot of dives. We brought up 100 and some rounds of ammunition that was buried in the river. So my divers went down there to take this ammunition out, because the Vietnamese had stored this ammunition in the river. So we had to go in there and take it out and dispose of it. But those are just water missions that we all combat swimmers. And we did a lot of dives. Hard physically work, because we were in the mountains, and I'm not sure if I can adequately describe the horrors, with the snakes and the tigers and everything else that made it a lake there. And just, as a leader, I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to let my guys down. But somewhere along the line, after a year in combat, what you look at is that enemy soldier, and the memories, of course, of the families, but it's not real. What's real is that enemy soldier, is sitting out there with a Chicom, submachine gun or grenade or something. You got to be on target, because if you don't, they're going to kill you. A lot of casualties, not in my group.
Were there other special operations forces that you worked with outside the Marines in any of those missions?
We had the SEALs down south, but they were young guys, and I remember when they first started off, when I was in First Force at that time. Good guys, but the jungle is awful hard. When the snakes are crawling around, and we had a lot of snake bites. I had one guy in Miller, he's gone now. I got bit twice by a snake. But we had the SEALs down south, and we had the CIA guys, or paramilitary guys. All very good. We all worked together. There was no real, we helped each other. The Special Forces, the Green Berets, we were all good friends. Yeah. And I'd go to their base. If they needed something, they'd come over and say, I needed this. If I needed a weapon, they had a lot of material that I didn't have. Army had a lot of stuff. And I'd go over to their base, and they would give me a new rifle that they got from somewhere. So the CIA helped me out a lot. because I was the guy there. I was the mean son of a gun. And that's what I was good at. But I wanted my team to survive. Didn't lose a man. A team broad-minded. I was attached to other units and battalions, and we fought with them. But no, I'm proud of Team Broad-minded. I'm alive today because of the experiences I had, and I was proud of that time. We wrote a couple books about it and did the documentary, and I said, you've been very good in terms of asking the appropriate questions. I don't know if I can do any better. A lot of this is emotional for me.
Yeah. As you kind of recollect the missions that you're on, you mentioned parachuting a few times. Can you share the parachuting then, sir?
I made 550 parachute jumps.
Wow.
Different places around the world. But I spent 1959 to 1978 when I retired on active duty and on parachute status. I was a combat swimmer. I'm a 3rd degree black belt, special operations, Aikido, judo, karate. You can't do what I did for those years and come out of this thing, sane.
Of those 550 jumps were some of those combat jumps?
No. So, well, I guess you might call them, I made 59 jumps on a drop zone in Okinawa that the Japanese used to use against the airfield called Yantan drop zone. We jumped all over the world.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I jumped in and what was it? I jumped in Africa. We were stationed with a group of Negritos. They were pygmies. We lived with them to learn how to eat and to survive, how to fish at night, how to catch fish with your hands, how to avoid eating poisonous things. Negritos were interesting folks, and they're in the Philippines, and we parachuted in to live with them at night. And when we caught an animal, we would move the whole village to where the animal was. You would share.
This was after Vietnam?
Before Vietnam. This is part of our training.
Oh, okay.
That we went all over.
Yeah. Was there one part of training that you found most challenging?
No, unfortunately, as a young man, as a young Jim Capers, the war was hard because I lost a lot of men, and I was away from the family. That was hard, but you can't stop Jim Capers.
From the scope of your time in Vietnam, you mentioned Phu Loc and Khe Sanh. Were there other areas that you spent a fair bit of time in?
Yeah. Khe Sanh, Phu Loc, a lot of different places that we went in. They would drop us behind enemy lines for 4 or 5 days. And then we would ambush their soldiers. We'd kill them all. We knew how to do that. At night we would be by a trail. We'd tie ourselves in with a rope. And my dog would give us an alert. He'd twitch his ears. We knew they were coming. And then sometime they might have 20 of them. And I would tie all of my men in. So when my dog gave me an alert, I would jerk on my rope, let everybody know that there was enemy soldiers there. And we had M60 machine gun. Everybody had M16s, 2 or 3 knives, pistols, When the dog alerted and they were in the kill zone, in a minute and a half, we'll kill them all. Even no chance, because we knew they were coming. We're in their areas now. And when we open up, my M60 man would open up. Then we had the M79, and when we open up on 50 or 60, we kill them all.
Yeah.
The ones we didn't kill with the weapons, we cut their throats and hit them here and rip their groins. No chance. But that was what we did. That was Team Broad-Minded. Now that's how good we were. I think probably I've seen a lot of different groups. I've worked with the Breeze Commandos. I've worked with the number goes on. I helped train the young Navy SEALs when they come on board. I was in California at First Force. And they brought them down to where we were, because we've been around for a long time. So we were very good. I got to be very good. And at the end of my career, they called me to the Pentagon, gave me a mission. And I accepted it. Then I changed my mind, because I thought it was too dangerous. Because I just didn't want to lose those wonderful young men. This is not Vietnam. This is in peacetime, but we had things to do. A lot of folks didn't know what was going on. When some of the bad guys decided, I don't know if you ever heard of a group called the Black September.
Mm-mm. Was that what that mission was about?
Well, the Black September was a group that somehow got their hands on a nuclear weapon. At least that's what we were told. We had to figure out a way to use something. I was called to the Pentagon. A lot of this stuff, nobody's ever going to admit this stuff. But I went to the Pentagon and I met with the Secretary of Defense. No, the Secretary of the Navy. Secretary of Defense was there. I don't even remember his name. But at that time, I was in Force Recon. I was late 30s. I'd been doing this stuff for a long time. So they gave me orders to get that nuclear weapon back. The Black September. I don't go into the details anymore. I don't mean how much more you want to talk about that stuff. When you talk about nukes and, a lot of the guys over the years, I've heard them talk about things that really weren't true. These were guys that's telling lies. I never had to, because my career was, it was really a lot of fun, but it was dangerous. I actually went to Cuba. The chief is back there saying, "Wait a minute. No, we parachute into Cuba." A lot of folks didn't know that when Kennedy told the Russians to get out of Cuba, all of them didn't go home.
That during the Bay of Pigs thing, or
After Bay of Pigs. You remember that, huh?
I mean, I've researched it. I certainly wasn't alive then, but yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with it. That's that's not something I think most people would know.
I was on the ground there.
What was the mission?
Some of the Russians that came into Cuba, Castro, I was coming home when Castro took over Cuba. I think that the Russians thought that if they could get, he was 9 miles south of border. And they had the nukes in Cuba. We knew that. Also, a lot of things going on at that time. I was just coming back from overseas in Okinawa or somewhere, I guess. They took us to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And it was kind of nice, I think, that to be a part of the history. The officers are reading about it nowadays. It was real. We come pretty close to blowing this earth up. Pretty damn close.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of it. I went to Washington and went to met with the Secretary of the Navy, Secretary of Defense. And the president was a guy named Jimmy Carter. And he called the Secretary of the Defense to see if I had landed in Washington. The Secretary of either the Navy or it might have been the Navy says he's here. The president knew I was there. I was prepared to do what I needed to do. I was good at it, But there are a lot of the stories that, I've written a lot of I've read a lot of stories from different adventurers, and you'll never seen around Bar Niga, and they write these things. And also, when I got nominated for the Medal of Honor, there were some folks that, well, they only giving it to him because he's black. I heard that story. Nobody's ever given me anything because I was black. Nothing. I've earned everything I ever got. All of the parachute badges and the awards and this Medal of Honor thing. President's giving it to me. I didn't ask him. He's giving this to me. You'll get a chance to see that.
From the time that you came back from Vietnam, which was 68, is that right?
67.
67. Once you returned from Vietnam for the last time, you were still on active duty for another 10 years or so. What was that part of your career like?
It was hard. In a family, and I said my wife and I had some differences, and I went to Europe, and I spent a year in Europe. And I was in Hamburg, Germany. There was an assassination team that tried to kill me. They missed.
Do you have any idea where they were from?
Yeah, I know. I killed them. I killed both of them. And I keep them over in the water.
After Germany, what did the rest of your career look like?
I came home and reunited with my wife, my son. And of course, Marine Corps called and says, well, maybe we might need to get you out of Dodge for a while. So they sent me to Hawaii. Came home, picked up my wife and my son, drove to L.A. Took us 4 days to get there. And then they flew us to Hawaii. And that didn't go all that well either. President Nixon was president, and he came to Hawaii. He was on his way to China. And see, our president now went to China. Nixon went there in 1972. I was in Hawaii after they jerked me out of Europe. But because I had the top secret clearance, I became an aide to the president.
Oh, wow.
And I became bodyguard and all that. But I got to see him. I got to talk to him. And I got to talk to his staff. He had the Secret Service guys. But I was pretty much the only one allowed to be in his presence with a weapon. He was a nice guy. He laughed a lot. And my wife met him. But then the word came out they were going to kill him. President of the United States was going to China. He wasn't supposed to make it. How do I know these things? Because some of his people were telling me. He was on a military base in Hawaii. And we had to get him off of there. Didn't get him to China because we were trying to get this war in Vietnam over. And he was trying, and China was supplying all this stuff to the Vietnamese people. It was kind of a mess. then we had the Germans involved. And so Nixon, no matter what you think of him, he didn't go to China. And they did stop the war in Vietnam. I was there in Vietnam. I was there when they went to China.
Yeah.
How do you figure all this stuff?
What are your thoughts on how Vietnam ended?
I wasn't too happy about it, but I mean, they've been there for a long time, the Vietnamese people. I don't think the Americans had the right to it. So there should be self-determination, just like we want our own self-determination. I think that it was time to get out of there, like the French when they got out, almost went back in. French Foreign Legion, remember those days? Knew some of those guys. Weren't good fighters, though.
For the last part of your career, was the time spent around the president, was that the end of your military career?
No, I was in Hawaii, and this was 1972. My general called me in and told me he was sending me home. I said, why? He told me because he had information they want to kill my wife and my son at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. I need to go get my wife. I need to get out of here. I'm sending you home. Told him that, I've been all over and fought the wars and all this and that. And this was a chance for my wife and I. We were going to try this divorce thing. That didn't work out. So we're back together now. And Hawaii was kind of a nice place to be. We enjoyed the beaches and the palm trees and all that. And I told the general that, maybe it's be a tough time to go home now. We're still trying to figure this thing out. And he said, yeah, but I have evidence that your wife and your son will be assassinated at 10 o'clock and they were supposed to be there for stuff that was going on. And he told me to go home and get them ready. We're leaving. I said, damn, general, I just got here. And then I told him, general, all I'd been through the last, few years, I think that this will be a good chance for us to get our family back together again. And then I said, well, general, got to tell you, since I'm here, I told him if one hair is harmed off the head of my wife or my child, I'll kill every one of them. He said, I was a captain then. He said, Captain, you can't be talking like that. And we all know what happened in Hong Kong. And that's why you got in trouble. I said, General, they started it. I killed the two of them, yeah, but they tried to kill me. He said, well, there's a different story coming in from Intel. And I admitted I killed them. I killed both of them. Yeah. But what he'd heard was not correct. And I also told him that I'm good at what I do. I kill those guys in Hamburg, Germany. He said, yeah, but I got to get you off the island because if something happened to you as a Negro, all of the Negroes here on this base, we're going to have a problem. And I don't want that kind of a problem. And I said, well, General, you got it. Got up and walked out. And the chief of staff was outside, a guy named Bob Shuford. He was a colonel. And I walked out, and I was going to the water fountain. And the chief walked down with me. He said, where you going, Captain? I said, I'm going home now. He said, well, the gem was set for you. Don't you think you should have let him finish talking to you? I said, no, I was finished talking. He decided to send me home. Now, my family is at risk, and they didn't tell me at first. Didn't tell me that. They let my family be at risk. And now they tell me they're going to kill my wife and my son. Work that way. I'll kill them all. But to end the story, the chief told me that, you know, oh, maybe you ought to think about this. I said, Chief, you should have known better. You can't talk to me that way. Nobody ever, I'm talking to the chief now. I've left the general's office, and then the chief come to see me. He said, he's a good old Southern boy. He said, back in Alabama, wherever he lived there, we treat our Negroes better than you've been treated. He said, I'm not going to let this happen. He was a step down from the general. He said, you go get your family, talk to Dottie, and I'll help you out. I said, Colonel, you're about ready to retire. He said, I'm not going to make general anyway. I'm not going to let him screw you up. So I went home and I sat down and told Dottie that we have to go home now. And she said, well, didn't we just go through this divorce? She said, I'm not going. I said, well, this stuff is real. These folks out there want to, She said, I'm not scared anymore. She said, that flag that's in our house, it's my flag too. It's not a capers talking. It's not a capers. I love her so much. So I'm not afraid. I'll stay here with you. You're my husband. I'm going to stay here with you. They're not going to scare me. It's my flag. I went back and I told the chief that I think that we need to go. And so they got me on a luxury ship or something to send us home from Hawaii. But she didn't want to get on the ship. She don't swim. So we got us a plane and we shipped our car, and then we flew to L.A., picked up the car. I had her and the baby. We drove cross country and got home to Baltimore on Christmas Eve, 1972, I guess it was. But we were alive.
Once you moved back to Baltimore and then that remaining 6 years or so in the military, what were you doing for that period?
They sent me back to school, what they call amphibious warfare school. See, I had never gone to OCS or the basic school. My commission was in Vietnam in 5 minutes. And this colonel came in and took off my staff sergeant Chevins, and he put on lieutenant bars. And I raised my right hand, and in 5 minutes I was a 10. And I didn't really know a whole lot about that because I'd never gone to what they call OCS or the basic school where officers learn to become an officer. So I went through the ranks as an officer without learning how to be an officer.
When you decided to retire, what was the driving force behind that?
I lost a man. He went on a Helicast mission where we take divers out in helicopters and we drop them out in the water. And McManus was one of my divers. And the helicopter took him out and they dropped in the water. And he hit backwards, hit his head, and he drowned. Bothered me, This was not combat. This was a training mission. And his mother forbade me to come to the funeral. She blamed me for that Helicast mission. And he's from New York, planned to go as his commanding officer, go to the funeral. She says, no, I don't ever want to see him again. I was hurt. I liked McManus. He was a good man, and it just so happens, a lot of things happened that particular day, and I was out there. I watched him go in the water. Never come out. So I think I went home that day, and I told Dottie, maybe, it's time for us to go home. She said, well, I'm home, sweetheart. So I lost another man today. I've lost, I lose. And my line of work was high risk. They paid you a little more money and expected miracles out of you. I lost my share of troops in combat and peacetime. And there's other stories about, high risk when I did a lot of work on nuclear submarines. I did a lot of that kind of stuff, My background is still classified. Lost men. And I'm happy about the career. I've been trying to put it all down on paper. I write certain things about this or that and some things I can't remember. But the transition from being a Marine officer to, a family man and then deciding that it's time to shut it down. And I think after I lost that Madison, Florida, and then we almost lost that nuclear boat up in New London, the USS Nautilus. And I called my wife that night. I was up in New London, and I called her and told her that, sweetheart, maybe it's time for us to go home now. And I said, I had, I was 23 years and I'd gotten to the rank of major and I was selected for lieutenant colonel. And they were telling me, you got a good combat record. You're certainly going to make colonel. But all that didn't matter much anymore now. I was beginning to hear about the guys who did the peacetime guys. I'm never going to forget the guys that lost in battle. But the peacetime guys, the training missions, and I lost men who died of a heart attack on a 15-mile march. And I was pushing my body. The war was over now, but I wasn't able to run as far as I used to. I'd come home and God would help me in the door. I wasn't 40 years old yet. I'm still running marathons. I'm making jumps and dives and trying to lead 200 of the finest young Marines around. And they trusted me. Now, my pace and running was a little slow. I took my troops to somewhere in Pennsylvania, and we ran home from Pennsylvania to Camp Lejeune, 550 miles we ran. Took us 4 days to make the trip. Jeez. And then I wouldn't quit. Felt like it. But those are the kind of things I had to go through from start to finish. And, now it's time to consider what am I going to do now? I got a wife and a son. What kind of living am I going to be able to make? I didn't make any money as a Marine officer. Wasn't a whole lot that I had to, I was proud of my service to my country, but what have I got now? And then my health got bad and nobody thought I'd make it this far.
Once you did retire, what did you do professionally?
I bought a radio station, bought a construction company, and I don't know. I didn't know how to make a lot of money. I became vice president for the Jefferson Powder Corporation. Now, I made a few bucks here and there, but I know when I was vice president, they sent me to Harvard Business School up in Boston. That was a company that they made me vice president. And they sent me to Harvard. I went to Harvard, became the class president about that. Because we had 50 young students. And they were youngsters, and I'm an old guy, 40 years old, and I was a class president. So I had to keep these guys and young ladies in line. Okay, lunch is an hour now. I want you back in your seats. class was going to start. They wouldn't come back on time. So I had to, the professors used to say to me, well, Major, they told me that you did all those great things, and how come the students can't get back in their seats at 1:00? I said, all right. So I held a meeting with them all, and the professor introduced me that I'm going to be in charge of, get them back from lunch or wherever they go. And, I'm class president. I don't know anything about that kind of stuff. A lot of them were a lot smarter than I was. But I got it done. I sat down and I talked with them, and a lot of them would come to me with their issues, and I'm like grandpa to some of these kids, but they were the top of the line. I enjoyed it, and I graduated. And they gave me a nice certificate, which I got at my house somewhere. So it was a good experience, but I didn't make a lot of money. Wasn't important to me. I didn't take care of my family, but I didn't make millions of dollars. I had an opportunity, but I didn't. I went into some crooks, folks who stole money from me, the folks that I trusted, and but that was all right. Go ahead, son.
I was curious if, as you look back on your career, is there any decision or part of it that you regret?
Regret? Maybe I stayed a little bit too long in the Marine Corps, I think, when I was younger, and I don't feel sorry for myself. I wished I could have done a better job in some ways. I got a foundation that my wife and I started. We raised a special needs child. So we thought, well, let's jump into this thing. Let's see if we can help the community out. And we still have the foundation. Frank helps me with it. And the community comes in, and we have lunch, and we talk about common issues, how we can better help the community out. And, if that's been okay, we're had it there for a few years now.
You ended up writing the book Face Through the Storm. What was the decision-making process to write that, and what was your goal with it?
After my wife passed, I moved to California, and I had to figure out something. Wasn't quite sure what it all meant. Yeah, I told you when I was on the way out there, we flew cross country and a rocky flight, and pilot came on and said, well, we're going through some turbulence, so fasten your seatbelts. And the light came on. I don't care if the plane lands or not. Much hell as I had gone through, many battles that I fought. Many times I run on ammunition, and then I could, around the mountain, I could see a little helicopter coming. He comes and we're on the ground, and we're out of ammunition, we're out of grenades, and this helicopter's coming around. It's a small helicopter. It's coming around, and I could see it. If he gets shot down, I'm not sure how we're going to pull this off, because he's got the ammunition. And then he comes and, he wobbles, and he hits a tree or something like that. And then it has a wobbling effect, and it crashes in. And my men run over to the helicopter, and the crew chief throws out some grenades. He throws out ammunition, and he throws out a case of sea rations. And he took off and he left. And all my men survived another 2 days with what that pilot did that day.
Did you have a single goal with Faith Through the Storm? Is there a number one reason why you wanted to write it?
I have a religious ideology because I saw a lot of God in Vietnam. Maybe it's my own thought of what God is, or and the good things. When I wrote about after Phu Loc, we were not flying home. We were going to the hospital, and we come through a storm, and the helicopter started going down. Everybody was on board, dog's body on board. We were trying to get to the hospital. And I'm watching all of this and raiding, and the helicopter's going down, a bit of wavering. And I'm in the door of the helicopter. All my men there are behind me. They're all moaning because they're in bad shape. Blood's all over the helicopter. And I'm in the door of the helicopter looking down as the ground goes by. I'm bleeding. Everybody on there's bleeding. The dog's body is next to me. So those are the things I remember. And then we to the hospital, what they call it, a med, where they up off the bodies and do what they can for you. And then the helicopter lands, hard landing. And all the guys are bleeding, so the blood flows out of the helicopter. And one of the crew chief ran out and he grabbed King by his collar and snatched him off the helicopter onto the ground. It's like a thud. And I told whoever it was there, I said, don't drag. He was dragging him. And King was a big dog, and I said, don't drag him. Pick him up and carry him. And he said to me, the damn dog is dead. I got things to do. I had 3 rounds left in my rifle. And I pointed at him. Told him, you pick King up and carry him like the warrior he is, or I'll kill you right here. It's the M16. And he picked up King. That King was a big dog. He was fearsome. And he picked him up and carried him alongside of me. And they took King into another part of the hospital. Then they took me into someplace, and the doctor came in and he said, Lieutenant, you've been hit pretty hard, pretty bad, but we're going to try to pull you through. It's okay, Doc. Let's get started. And he said, well, I'm gonna give you a shot. I'm gonna give you some. They give you what kind of shot? Morphine. Morphine, yeah. I'll give us some morphine, but they said, no, you lost a lot of blood, and but you were hanging there with me. He was a young guy. He looked like he was crying. Of course, he'd probably seen a lot of that day, wounded coming in. And he looked like he was crying. I said, Doc, it's all right. Let's go to work. And they told me to count to 10. And I started counting. And then he said, it's going to be all right. And then for some reason, during that period right there, I was not there in where he was. I was in another place. And It was out in the hallway. This is my memory of it. And, somebody came by, trying to recreate that because I had morphine in me. And he said, this one is dead. Those are the words I heard. This one is dead. And I was lying there, and all these cadavers was in this hallway. They were waiting for vehicles to come and take them to the graveyards. And the young man, all dead. Now I was there, and they said, this one is dead. I'm lying there. And then all of a sudden, another person come by, and he looked at me, and he said, this one is breathing. This one here is breathing. He's not dead. And the corpsman came up, and they pulled me out where the cadavers were and took me back into the operating room. They told me I'd been declared dead. And all of a sudden, they said I wasn't dead. And they took me back into the operating room. And they cut my body open. And I was alive. God had, once again, God said, I will call you home one day. But this is not the day you will live. Memories. Is it true? Who was this person? Who was this person that come by and said, this person is not dead. He's breathing. Was that an angel? Was that God? Did God send this person? Who was it? I don't know. But I'm alive.
Major, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit down
Thank you.
and ask my questions. And we got the Medal of Honor ceremony coming up sometime soon. We don't have an exact date on it yet, but we'll certainly be on the lookout. Faith Through the Storm is the book. And apparently you're working on another one, or going to be, Rafe. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Well, there's so much, when you get to be my age, and we just talked about a wife, a son, and then the times when people tried to kill me and come pretty doggone close. God stepped in. The time when I thought that I recognized God, when I saw that big ball of light, and the voice said that you will see God. And I saw the ball of light. Now, was that God, or was that something that tells me that you will see God one day? But there's a lot of things that as a human being, we read the Bible and we come away with certain conclusions, and you try to be, youngsters like yourself, to try to see if I can make you understand what I went through and why they're going to give me the Medal of Honor. There are some folks who don't think I deserve it. There are some folks who think that maybe this is the president's way of increasing his popularity numbers. But in other way, I kind of feel like, looking back on it, what I can say to you, based on what I remember, my medical record and all those things. And I think that there's a good shot that lieutenant at that time, on that trail that day in Vietnam years ago, probably did enough to be considered for the be considered for the Medal of Honor. Yeah, I think so. I risked it all, and I didn't lose a man. So I think that, there are some who maybe think I didn't do enough, but they weren't there in Phu Loc. They weren't there when we ran ammunition and saw that helicopter crash trying to get to us. Those are the things that the intangibles, I don't know what qualifies as a medal of honor. I never saw myself as a medal of honor, candidate, because that wasn't important to me.
Yeah.
And I want to bring my troops home.
Well, I know I know a number of Medal of Honor recipients from kind of my era, and they don't hand those out by accident. The amount of gates and checkpoints that it has to go through to actually get through. I hope that you don't have any doubt that you deserve it.
My wife believed in it because when I got out of the hospital years ago, some of the survivors were still alive. They would come to the house and tell Dottie about Phu Loc. And she'd heard the stories about some of the survivors. We were all close back in those days. So she heard the stories. And so I think that she believed that she had the letters that I wrote home. I think she believed that her husband had earned that award.
For guys from my generation, growing up, hearing about stories of your generation fighting and inspired us to also join, and I just want to thank you for your service and everything you put your body and family through for this country, because it means a lot.
All for this country. A lot of times I get asked, Major, after you went through, come on now, be honest with me. Come on, just you and me talking. Would you do it again? Everybody wants to know if I want to do it again. I said, what are you talking about? But then again, in spite of all the hardships and for this country, so you gotta believe in this country. I know what it meant. It's our bright light. It's the greatest country in the world. We save more people. We feed more people. We cure more sicknesses. We make more sacrifices. This is the greatest country in the world. And I've seen a good bit of it. I've been to Africa, parachuted into a village that had pygmies in it. I had no idea what I was. All these memories I have, being in Germany and different places and meeting youngsters. And today I meet the team here. I really appreciate you guys being here, and I hope that maybe you'll come by the house sometime and have a cup of coffee.
That would be amazing. I appreciate the offer, and thank you for the kind words. And again, thank you for taking the time. It's an absolute honor to be able to. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, son.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right, for the listener and viewer, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Victor.